This brings left and right people out on the same page. Nobody wants to hear about pensioners freezing to death at home. And 10,000 people died in this country last year because they couldn't afford energy, because they couldn't afford the heating. It was 31,000 excess winter deaths, and a third of those are attributed by the World Health Organization directly to fuel poverty. So it's killing people. And so we have to be really explicit. We have to create the political space to say energy is a right. It's not a commodity. Access to it is a right, not a privilege. We want it green. We want it under public and community control. And the power of that industry is so massive, like all over the world, and how they're impacting communities, how they're impacting our climate. That it's actually urgent. It's actually an emergency that we sort that out. As an area of our lives that we need to bring under common control. And you'll find a lot of open ears to that, and it's a really clear one. And I think we need to be much more explicit about that and include it in everything we do. And it gives hope to people as well.
Can I just ask, I don't know, the energy industry, is that unionised?
It's quite unionised. It's mostly...
Is there a chance of like kind of a sit-in strike where they just, the energy union, the workers just take the industry off of them?
Well, it's really difficult in any industry to have a kind of political strike unless you're very, very strong.
Yeah.
It virtually never happens. You can do political action that's sort of disguised a bit like a strike, like ILW, the Longshore Workers Union in the United States of America. They held like a union meeting on a particular day, all of them together, which meant that they all stopped work, and it was a de facto strike. And they did that for Mumia Abu Jamal, a black journalist linked to the Black Panthers who's on death row. I think that's a difficult area, and I think it's going to take a lot of time before you can find any kind of action from within the industry itself. But as customers, there is action, and like a can't pay, won't pay campaign would be great, but it's also a really difficult one because you can't pay, you won't pay, okay, no energy, freeze in your house. Like there's a really direct consequence to not being able to pay your bill. Someone breaks into your house and installs a prepayment meter. There are various methods of resistance that people have thought up themselves to not have to pay, and that's also quite individualized. So the collective action, I think, on one level, before we can be more visible and organized, is to support the Energy Bill of Rights. It is, because it's a kind of clear mandate of, we get people writing to us saying, complaining about a lot of what they're suffering from energy companies, and they're wearing multiple blankets at home, they're not eating, their children are hungry, they've had a meter forced on them against their will, and we can give them advice and we can point them in lots of directions about sort of winter fuel payments and how you negotiate with the company and how you can write to the boss and how you can do a staggered debt repayment. But actually, that's not the solution. The solution is you've got rights. Let's stand up for each other. Let's make this about our right to this. This shouldn't be owned by companies. And that's the sort of message that people are very open to at these points of crisis. Like it's very clear that the answer isn't just a little payment from the government or a little bit of extra insulation. And yeah, I just think it's really important to give people that hope and let's collectively rally behind this. And it's not a party political thing, it's just a set of principles. You had your hand up.
I was just going to say, I think it's more important that we make the current means of producing electricity redundant. So it's not so much attacking the oil industry from within the oil industry, you're just making oil redundant. You're replacing it by other means, I think.
It's not just oil though, it's gas. And actually the government will
all
argue
of those
that
fossil fuels, I think material fuels, they're always going to go downhill. Whereas if you've got stuff that everything that just harvests naturally, with like wind and solar and even
totally, but we need to fight for those subsidies. That the government doesn't subsidise those industries at all because they're so deeply embedded with the big six and with the big fossil fuel companies that are also behind these new fracking startup companies. So I agree with you, but it's going to take a lot of political pressure and action, and the way to that, I think, is look at what people's bills are, look at what people are suffering in their houses. Let's make this a class issue. It is a class issue. We live in a class system. We have to change that. I think often a lot of the kind of renewable energy arguments come from quite middle class sort of spaces, and okay, but it's not speaking to people's bills. It's not speaking to people going to food banks who get kettle packs because they can't afford to actually turn the gas on. So they just turn the electric kettle on and then they can eat from the kettle pack from the food bank.
Sorry, but how do you suppose to help those people directly?
To help them directly?
Yeah.
Well, you can do like the advice and all that stuff, but it has to be some sort of collective action where it becomes so politically important or so politically urgent for the government when they see enough people on the streets and they see enough protest, basically collective action against corrupt housing associations and landlords. Cheyenne Housing in Tottenham occupied their housing office because they've got really faulty boilers and they're all paying loads of money for their bills. Like things like this that don't sound very sexy and glamorous and aren't going to get like mega retweets, but it's real. It's happening to people. So when all those people come out and the government starts to realise there's big political will behind this, because fucking hell, people hate the big six more than probably any other companies, but it's got to be visible. So how do we help? We try and agitate. We try and get people organised. We try and support these housing associations, get them linked up, get some exposure for them, and just plough on with radical messages as well.
Are you suggesting quite similar to what those mothers did in
E15 mums?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, they did something very specific to what their situation was, which was housing, the need for public housing, and they could animate that by occupying empty housing, and that's great. It's really we're struggling with how you animate a struggle around fuel poverty and big six energy companies. We've occupied British Gas's headquarters. We're like barricaded ourselves into 2 boardrooms for about 6 hours and did lots of social media saying we're occupying, raising awareness how many people are choosing between heating and eating. And we went to NPower on the day of the winter death statistics with a coffin with the number of winter deaths and had a big sort of people's assembly. But I think maybe blocking prepayment meters, maybe stopping the imposition when someone's got a warrant visit, someone's going to come to your house, break in, stick a meter in, bang, you are going to freeze. Maybe that, but that's also a bit problematic. That it's something that we could do, but it's quite hard to find out where they come from, and it will take a lot of research, probably be quite arrestable, but it's not easy. So that's why we're doing this Energy Bill of Rights thing as one thing. We're launching it in Parliament. We've got an early day motion. Everyone can write to their MP. It's a route. It's not maybe the most radical one, but it's creating some political space. Obi, you talk too much.
No, sorry.
No, this guy hasn't spoken yet.
Okay, go ahead. But then people are posting on Twitter.
Oh, okay, sorry.
We got 40 people watching at the moment.
Oh, okay.
Do you know if any of the big six have worker representation on their boards?
As in unions?
Yeah.
They probably do. I mean, there are definitely recognition agreements between some of the big six energy companies and Unite and probably GMB, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, they're there.
That goes to the extent of actually having someone on the board.
Whether they're on the board, I would seriously doubt that. Have you come across that?
No, well, I just think, thinking whether there are anything closer to like the John Lewis model of and how that might affect actually the decision. If there was a way into having more transparent board meetings.
It's a problem. They might well have a representative, but they would be very tokenistic, and it doesn't really make that much of a difference when the big six write energy policy and they second their staff into the Department for Energy and Climate Change. Like a few dozen of them are working away in there on our energy policy. So having even if you had a really strong union and a union rep in the boards, there'd be one voice out of a group. They'd be drowned out. I don't know how
I wonder if that
they would influence the direction.
Whether that's an achievable target.
Yeah.
Short term for some kind of change.
I just don't think they'll be able to push for the dissolution of the company and for it to be turned into a decentralised.
I'm not saying I'm not saying things would change overnight, but if you're looking for ways to change the structure.
It's a fair point. I think we should finish soon.
Some of them say that they pay for the own meter installed. And
Yes, some people like prepayment meters, it's true. Some people want to have prepayment meters, even though you pay more than people on direct debit, and that's for control. That's a poverty issue. That's because you want to know exactly how much you're spending, and you know you can't spend over a certain amount. So again, it's a sort of trap in a way. It's not, I wouldn't necessarily say it's voluntary. It's kind of, it's the best of a bad
he's saying that
situation.
you can pay to have your own meter installed and avoid all rental charges, just pay for fuel used.
Yeah, most social housing has that, where you just pay for what you use.
Yeah, but you
Don't
pay
pay
more. You pay more. And if you go into emergency credit, you pay even more when you're on emergency credit. Like the people on bills, it's about 80. It depends. If you fall into emergency credit all the time, then you're paying all the time.
Yeah, if it
more.
goes on the emergency,
But a lot of
you
people
don't.
fall into that. A lot of people fall into that, and also like there are like companies put in hidden costs, and you do end up paying more on a prepayment meter than on a paper bill. It can be about £80 more a year or more, depending on how, depending on your energy provider. But people will often pay more. It's like the poverty. It's a really unjust system. And yeah, you might get cut off as well if you keep dropping into emergency credit. They cut you off, and then you have to pay
I know
for.
someone that had one, and they didn't use the.
No, you pay the standing charge, mate.
Yes,
you pay
they
the standing
didn't use
charge.
it at all, and they said I'm not paying, but they said you have to
Yeah,
pay anyway.
we want the abolition of the standing charge.
Yes.
Because even if you don't turn anything on, and that's how a lot of people get into debt as well. They think they're being really frugal with their energy, and all right, but then they still have to pay it. Yeah, it can be standing charge about £3. It can be about £3 a day, £2 a day.
A day.
Can be.
Yeah.
Can be.
What, is that every day? People who have meters?
Yeah,
Yeah, you have to pay
standing charge
all the
as well.
time.